Tonight on CBC Vancouver News. More fires and serious safety concerns.
As you've seen, I'm extremely frustrated.
Vancouver's fire chief shares more worry amid complex problems of housing and health. Plus, a First Nation outside BC starts taking control of its own child and family services.
Protect our children and love our children.
After one of its own children died tragically in Vancouver. And liquidation sale? Nordstrom begins its shutdown in Canada.
The reductions at the moment are very disappointing.
I could find something at the thrift store. I can find something like at the vintage store.
What shoppers say they'll miss most.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. Anita is away tonight. Vancouver's fire chief says the downtown Eastside has seen a double-digit increase since the start of this year. No one was injured on Sunday when several propane tanks exploded in a tent. As Susanna De Silva explains, the incident has ignited calls for a solution to the current housing crisis.
Explosions echoed through the downtown east side as firefighters scrambled to reduce the danger, dragging a 100-pound propane tank away from the flames.
I was quite shocked, even just the chaos and hearing about the damage to a building.
Vancouver's fire chief issued an order in July to clear the streets on the downtown east side of an increasing number of tents. 8 months later, the tents have been reduced, but she says the fires are up 20% in the first 2 months of this year.
It's risky behavior. A lot of people, I'm going to suggest, a lot of it is smoking-related materials, whether it's cigarettes or drugs, and here comes a fire.
As we talk, an alarm rings out.
A tent fire at the corner of Hastings and Main. Exactly what I'm concerned about. And it doesn't matter any time of the day or night, whether the weather's good or bad. You know, we have a lot of people there, a lot of risk.
Luckily, this fire was put out quickly with the help of people nearby, but it's a situation that has local businesses concerned and calling for more creative solutions.
We have vacant lots, and you could probably squeeze 20 or 30 tiny homes into those lots, have them connected to water and sewer, have them connected to services from nonprofits and that type of thing.
BC Housing says 129 new units were made available since July, with more on the way. But advocates say real solutions are needed now.
We have to stop pretending that people will just agree to freeze. We have to actually engage in their reality and find options that are better than what we have right now.
Just make sure there's a wide berth around it.
John Henry has been down here 5 months.
The fire department kept shutting us down there, and so they left us no choice but to hide our little fires to keep ourselves warm. And having a fire inside of a tent isn't recommended, and it's definitely not safe. So propane is the only way.
And a risk many here say they have to take. Susanna De Silva, CBC News, Vancouver.
After weeks of pressure, one of the Prime Minister's key aides is going to testify before the Commons Committee examining allegations of election interference. Justin Trudeau's chief of staff says she is appearing voluntarily, but as the CBC's Travis Danraj tells us, the Liberals had been stalling the work of that committee to try to block her testimony. Now the other parties are claiming political victories.
It took weeks of pressure for the Prime Minister to back down and flip-flop.
In question period, the Conservative leader took a victory lap. Katie Telford, the Prime Minister's chief of staff, will testify before a parliamentary committee investigating foreign election interference.
Will he allow Canadians to get to the truth and prevent this from happening again before the next election with a full public inquiry now?
Canadians know this is an extremely serious issue and should not be a partisan issue.
But partisan politics was on full display in the House.
We forced this government to end the obstruction in committee and to allow the Chief of Staff of the Prime Minister to testify, rendering the Conservative motion useless, which is not surprising because they just want to play games.
Ms. Telford, any ideas on testifying?
For her part, Telford wasn't talking to reporters today. The Prime Minister insisting committee testimony from Telford isn't the best way to investigate the issue of foreign interference in elections.
The Conservatives are trying to gin up the toxicity and partisanship by making political theater out of it and by catching Ms. Telford or others in not being able to answer direct questions.
She is a critical witness to get to the heart of the scandal, which is what did the Prime Minister know, when did he know about it, and what did he do or fail to do about Beijing's interference in our elections.
Telford won't appear before the Procedure and House Affairs Committee until after next week's budget. Trudeau says his focus remains on the work of former Governor General David Johnston, who has been tasked with assessing the impact and extent of interference. Today, Johnston's mandate was unveiled. He'll examine the last two federal elections and assess whether the government did enough to defend Canada from foreign actors. He could also call for a full public inquiry and will reveal that decision by the end of May. Travis Stanrash, CBC News, Ottawa.
For months now, allegations of interference by the Chinese government in Canadian affairs has dominated headlines. Now a group of academics has released an open letter warning that recent discussions have the potential to stoke anti-Asian sentiment. For more on this, we're joined by the CBC's Joel Ballard. Joel, tell us about this letter.
It's addressed to David Johnston, the former Governor General now tasked with investigating claims of election meddling by the Chinese government. It was signed by 9 academics from across the country and warns that recent rhetoric around interference could quickly turn toxic. It comes after recent reports of alleged interference by Beijing in both federal elections and Vancouver's municipal election, claiming the interference aimed to get a Chinese Canadian elected. Based on classified CSIS documents. One of the signatories of the letter says the ongoing discussion of the unproven accusations is being used as a tool by politicians, the media, and others to stoke anti-Asian sentiment.
I'm a historian, and so it's not my job to predict the future. But one of the things about knowing our long history of using the tool of anti-Asian and anti-Chinese racism to create fear, to create, support also.
Yu says it can unfairly tarnish people's reputations and forces people of Chinese descent to prove their loyalty to Canada. Last week, Vancouver Mayor Ken Sim called the insinuations incredibly disappointing.
If there's proof of foreign interference in our election, I want to know about it because I'm a Canadian. I was born here. I was raised here. I went to school here. I started 2 businesses here. I raised my family here. I chose to be here. I love Canada.
Now, these discussions have impacted many people in the Chinese Canadian community. Former Vancouver City Councillor Tung Chan says some are worried they will be linked to the alleged actions of the Chinese government, and it's generating fear.
The whole discussion, the whole issue comes at the heel of a tremendous increase of hate crime in Canada, and particularly in BC, Vancouver.
Joel, what does the letter suggest the federal government do to address this?
The group supports an investigation into alleged election interference, but that support includes 5 different recommendations. Among them is a call for governments at all levels to reinforce extensive anti-racist education for all public servants and in schools.
Joel Ballard, thanks very much. Members of Saskatchewan's Key First Nation traveled to BC today for the first step in a long journey. For the first time, they're beginning the process of taking control of their own child and family services. The nation was spurred to action by the tragic death of Noel O'Soup in Vancouver. As Michelle Gassoub reports, the nation has strong words for this province.
Key First Nation councillor Solomon Rees not mincing his words.
We cannot and will not allow this to happen again.
As he announced his nation's plans to take over jurisdiction of its own family and child services. The Key First Nation driven to action by the death of Noel O'Soup.
There's been a culture in this country of taking Indigenous children and placing them in non-Indigenous settings, and that is completely unacceptable.
O'Soup fled a ministry-run group home in May 2021. Her body was found a year later in the downtown Eastside apartment of a man with a history of preying on women. She was just 14.
She liked to, just be silly, take selfies, and sometimes you get to see her. She'd be off in her own little world, and I always wonder what she'd be like today.
Noel's uncle says he was never told by the ministry when she went missing and learned of her death through the media, even though he'd been actively trying to get custody of her.
because of the resources, I guess, that I have here in Fort St. John, she would have had a way better chance. She would have had a life, you know, at the end of the day. She'd still be alive today.
During their visit, the Key First Nation met with BC's Attorney General and the Minister of Children and Family Development. That ministry writing in a statement that Osupe's death was unimaginable and heartbreaking, and saying changes introduced under Bill C-92 mean that any First Nation in BC can exercise their inherent jurisdiction over child welfare services based on their own child and family laws. The Key First Nation had a stark message for MCFD, which until today hadn't commented on Osupe's death.
Protect our children and love our children. Love them the way you love your own children.
Indigenous children represent less than 10% of BC's child population, but make up 68% of children in care. Osupe's family hopeful the changes could save young Indigenous lives.
This case has become something bigger than anything that I could ever imagine, and it seems like it's helping a lot more people, you know, in good directions, and that's another thing that I can take away for like a silver lining of this case.
Michelle Gassoub, CBC News, Vancouver.
A warning, this next story contains details which may be distressing. BC's police watchdog has now cleared Mounties of any wrongdoing in connection to the death of a suspended Surrey Police Service officer at an indoor gun range last month. RCMP responded to reports of a man in distress near 98th Avenue and 201st Street in Langley. The Independent Investigations Office says video footage and witnesses confirmed that before Mounties could approach, the man sustained a self-inflicted injury. He was an off-duty member of the Surrey Police Service, and at the time, he was under investigation for alleged breach of trust. The IIO says neither police action or inaction were responsible in his death. Jury selection has begun in the trial of a man accused of murdering a teenage girl in Burnaby. Ibrahim Ali was arrested and charged with first-degree murder in the death of 13-year-old Marissa Shen. The teenager's body was found in Central Park in the summer of 2017. Ali, who is a Syrian refugee, had no previous criminal record at the time of his arrest. The trial is set to begin April 3rd. A Vancouver parent is now launching a class action lawsuit against Epic Games, makers of the popular video game Fortnite. The parent claims the game's design is addictive and led to her son developing a dependence on it. Epic Games says in a statement, these claims do not reflect how Fortnite operates and ignore all the ways parents can control their child's experience through Epic parental controls. It says it will fight these inflammatory allegations in court. The lawsuit has raised questions about the role parents and guardians play in monitoring their children's online gaming.
Many parents, their first reaction when we have this conversation is, well, you know, my kid knows a lot more about technology than I do, so I just hand them the device and let them figure it out. I think the message to parents is, even if you're not, a self-styled expert, you don't have to be. It isn't about your own level of expertise. It's about being there as a resource to have those conversations with your kids.
None of the allegations have been proven in court. A classic Canadian winter activity is under threat. A warming climate is making it harder and harder and more expensive to maintain outdoor skating rinks. Our Emily Chung has more on the efforts to keep it going, though.
When we think of a Canadian winter in our nation's capital, this is what we picture. But this winter has been a mild one across eastern Canada, and for the first time in its history as an outdoor skating rink, Ottawa's Rideau Canal never opened for skating. Winters are getting warmer, and in other parts of the world, many cities are giving up the winter tradition of outdoor ice rinks. This year, San Jose, California, Monaco, and Toul, France were among those that replaced them with roller rinks instead, citing high energy costs. In France, eco-conscious mayors have argued for years that outdoor ice rinks weren't sustainable in their warming climate.
One of the challenges is the fact that refrigerated rinks are far more expensive. They also use refrigerants and energy, which contribute to the root source of this, which is greenhouse gas emissions.
But in Canada, outdoor skating is part of our culture and identity, and cities like Mississauga, Ontario, are looking for ways to keep it alive.
Climate change is a factor. As we look at the winter and we look at ice, we really have to look at synthetic surfaces, certainly refrigerated surfaces.
A few years ago, North Vancouver, BC, built its largest outdoor rink in the Waterfront Shipyards district.
I'm glad we followed through and was able to make this come to realization, but some of the challenges obviously are having an outdoor skating rink in a temperate climate.
The city has found a way to offset some of the higher energy use and costs of running a refrigerated outdoor rink in a mild climate. Refrigeration systems use energy to remove heat. Instead of dumping that heat, this one feeds it into local buildings for water and space heating.
So that heat, which is waste here, becomes beneficial heat for homeowners in the neighborhood.
Reducing the natural gas they burn, making the ice rink 2 to 3 times more efficient than a regular rink. Boosting efficiency makes a difference, but cities across Canada will need to consider many ideas and options to sustain outdoor skating as our winters get warmer. Emily Chung, CBC News, Mississauga.
Meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe joins us now with the forecast, having timed the sun to be right behind her. Way to go, Angel.
Didn't I do that well? Yes. It's like I knew the exact sunset
Yeah, we get
time,
it.
and
You're
as a
cool.
Okay, well, let me just tell you, Dan, it feels great on the back of my head. Yeah, if you didn't get a chance to step out and enjoy the sun today, we've got another day of sunshine in the forecast. But boy, did it feel nice to have that sun and double-digit temperatures. Let me show you the numbers that we hit across the province today. The highs, 15 in Pitt Meadows and Abbotsford, and 11 at YVR, but downtown we hit 12, 13 degrees, 12 over towards Victoria. All of these temperatures a degree or two above seasonal, more like 5 degrees above seasonal for the Okanagan, down towards Osoyoos, 16 today. And it's going to be a little bit warmer for tomorrow as that high pressure that's bringing us the sunny skies shifts a little eastward, and that'll bring a bit of a southerly flow, so expect it to feel even warmer for your Wednesday. Notice the clouds, though, starting to sneak in across the northwest. That is going to be our Thursday story. So taking you through the next 24 hours, not much. We may see some morning fog out towards the Strait, the southern Gulf Islands, but for us in Metro Vancouver, really clearing out. It's not until Thursday that we see those showers back. I've got a pretty decent forecast, something for everyone, Dan, and a good looking tomorrow.
Sounds good. Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
It is the end of an era for Nordstrom. The high-end retailer's liquidation sale started today in its Canadian stores. The CBC's Benit Brach met up with shoppers to see what deals they might find and what they'll miss most.
So one of the largest department stores in Vancouver is shutting down. Nordstrom, its liquidation sale is going on today, and we're going to go see what people think about it.
5% off, still can't afford it. Oh, well.
They had the best tomato soup. You could buy jars of tomato soup, and it was so good and very reasonable.
Did you buy anything today?
No. I really had my eye on the cutest sandal shoes for only $2,000. So
the reductions at the moment are very disappointing, 5%, but very sad. That's all I can say.
And what did you end up buying today?
I ended up buying some baby clothes for my granddaughter.
So everything here is 5% off. This black blazer is about $900, and 5% off of this would save you about $45. Meanwhile, this denim jacket is about $2,000, so you would save about $100 with 5%.
I love this coat. We were just saying it, like, it goes really well with my outfit. I feel like little Paddington Bear.
And how do you find the price?
It's too much for me, but I was thinking, like, I could find something at the thrift store. I could find something, like, at the vintage store.
And what are you going to miss about this place?
I think for me, it's more about going in and pretending to have like a different life almost. I can't afford the stuff that's in there, but I can walk around and, think of myself maybe in the future or something like that. I don't know. It's kind of like creating identity, and I think that's a big part of department stores closing, especially luxury ones, is that we can't afford this stuff anymore, and it's kind of more about where we're going as a society and less about clothes, really.
Millions of people cannot access the internet in the Indian state of Punjab as authorities conduct a region-wide manhunt. We'll take a look at the controversial move, which one Canadian politician calls draconian. Live interview after this. And hello to everyone watching our commercial-free live stream. Thanks for being here. In Quebec, advocates for the Anglophone, deaf and hard of hearing community say they need more resources. And as Chloe Rinaldi reports, they say there's only a handful of American Sign Language interpreters in the city and not enough money to deal with the current demand.
So you get certain warnings, like either your battery's low.
The app on Ashley Mayoff's phone helps her control her bone-anchored hearing aid. She says being an Anglophone in Quebec, born with hearing loss, has even more challenges.
Our services are even more limited. There is a longer waiting list and not as many organizations that provide services to English-speaking clients.
This family physician specializes with deaf and hard of hearing patients in Montreal. To communicate with them, she uses American Sign Language, or ASL, and Quebec Sign Language. But when she has to refer her patients to a specialist, they need an interpreter.
Now they tell me, well, I can't go see the specialist because I don't have an interpreter.
Wang says there's only a handful of ASL interpreters in Montreal, and they're often booked. Most Francophones rely on Quebec Sign Language.
Deaf Anglophones are kind of like a minority within a minority. And there's a struggle in terms of getting constant funding to fund the interpreters.
To make things worse, one ASL interpretation program, ACELIS, had to temporarily suspend its programs for non-urgent cases. That includes city council meetings. The Metropolitan Montreal Deaf Community Centre supervises the group. It blamed delays in payments from healthcare providers for tying up its already limited funds. The president of the group says that services should resume shortly. This nonprofit says awareness about the needs of the community has increased.
Well, that also means that then the demand for these services and technologies has gone up. And so I think the other side of that is that we're now trying to catch up with the infrastructure that needs to be in place to support that.
Wager says that includes more ASL interpreters in Montreal and more constant funding to improve overall access, not just for emergencies.
So making sure that people are covered when they're going to school and medical appointments and legal, but not to forget about the social, because the social is where we feel included in our communities.
Chloe Rinaldi, CBC News, Montreal.
Tens of millions of people are without internet in the northern Indian state of Punjab, and they've been so for days. It's been blocked and gatherings restricted, all in the name of finding one man on the run. Ithil Musa brings us the details on the Sikh separatist leader who has authorities on edge.
Police in India's Punjab state are desperately trying to find Amarit Paul Singh. For a fourth straight day, authorities have blocked internet access for about 27 million people to prevent unrest as police continue their manhunt of Singh. The self-styled preacher openly supports the Khalistan movement, which seeks to create a sovereign state for Sikhs in India. Violent clashes have erupted over the years between followers of the movement and the Indian government. But Singh claims his true fight is against drug abuse, which has ravaged India's northern state.
I'm standing with my own people. There will be consequences, I know that. But what I can do? You want me to be silent, let my people die? I can't do that.
One expert says Singh's anti-drug stance is resonating with younger Punjabis.
His message was that youth need to get off drugs and return to their roots. And he was actually quite successful.
Last month, hundreds of Singh's supporters stormed a police station, demanding the release of an aide who had been arrested. Now he and his supporters stand accused of attempted murder, obstruction of law enforcement, and creating disharmony. Police say more than 100 people have been arrested since Saturday. Some experts say targeting Singh and his followers is about India's Hindu nationalist government silencing dissent.
In fact, minority communities, whether that's the Sikh community or Muslims or Christians, they've all been saying for a very long time that they're under siege.
Punjab's High Court is now demanding to know how Singh managed to elude a police force with 80,000 officers for days. The court has ordered the state government to submit a report on search operations, which it's calling an intelligence failure. Idil Musa, CBC News, Toronto.
As you just heard, Indian authorities have suspended internet services in Punjab. They argue it's necessary to maintain order and stop the spread of, quote, fake news. This isn't the first time such action has been taken in India, though. For more context, we turn to Jindi Singh. He's the National Director of Khalsa Aid Canada, and he joins us live. Jindi, first of all, there is concern from some people here in Canada about what the government's strategy means for human rights in the region. What is your organization hearing?
We're hearing similar things. We have people on the ground in India who are doing the humanitarian relief work that we're known for. We're a humanitarian relief group. And actually, initially, in the first few days, it was very difficult to get hold of them. Now, certain areas are beginning to get internet access, but still large chunks of the Punjab is kind of in an internet blackout. And it is very difficult to get hold of them. And it's caused quite a lot of anxiety for people who live out here.
Now, as we know, thousands of Canadians travel to India every year. But British Columbia has a very large Punjabi population. Should the Canadian government be advocating against these types of internet blackouts? What do you think its stance should be?
Well, we've seen them on Twitter. We've seen the NDP, the Liberal Party, the Conservatives have all talked about their concern about what's happening with respect to the internet blackout. And in fact, they've had a lot of pushback. I know Tim Uppal, for example, has had quite a bit of abusive language coming towards him, in fact, from some journalists in India as well.
You were among several high-profile Sikh people to have their Twitter accounts blocked, at least in India. What is happening there?
Well, I believe when you look at other countries like China who have their kind of firewall, within India, it seems they've passed laws that allow them to just, send a notice to a platform like Twitter and just say, we want these accounts withheld, not to be visible. And it's unfortunate because within the West, Twitter usually pushes back against governments when it comes to freedom of speech. But within India, it seems to be just bending over backwards and not doing anything. I'm sure if they took the government to court there, if it went all up to the Supreme Court, for example, most likely people's accounts would be turned back on again.
And lastly, we appreciate your time. How do you expect this to play out? How do you think this ends?
It's very difficult to know. It's a manhunt in a kind of a developed area like Punjab, where there's a lot of police on the ground, a lot of intelligence services, and not to be able to get hold of somebody like Amritpal Singh, this seems quite strange. And obviously, when there's so much doubt, there's so many stories out there about whether he's already been captured. And, the government there needs to be a lot more transparent. I believe lawyers have gone to court to try to get more information. But then India has also used a law called the National Securities Act, which actually was formed during the colonial period. And so several of the leaders of that group are now detained. They can be detained for 12 months with no need to charge them, and they don't need to be presented before court. So these kind of old colonial draconian laws are being used. And that to me is quite concerning. So it's very difficult to know what's going to happen moving forward.
Jindi Singh, we appreciate your time and your perspective. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much.
Inflation continues to drop month over month in Canada. While the pressures have eased in some areas, your food bill still stubbornly going up. That story after the break.
The vote was 33 to 32 against changing the regional plan, which would have allowed Spetafor and 2 other Delta landowners to subdivide their properties. The vote also overruled a January provincial cabinet order, which allowed removal of those properties from the agricultural land reserve. There was some stiff debate before today's vote. Vancouver Alderman Harry Rankin, among some other directors, felt that making an exception for Spetafor would set a dangerous precedent.
Once this goes, every other person can set their standards up against this application when they come before this particular group, and every one of them will, believe me.
One of the final arguments in support of the Spetafor bid came from Delta Mayor Ernie Burnett.
It has been proven beyond a doubt from the discussions from farmers and others that this land is not viable, and I doubt that it could be made viable without substantial sums of money.
A single vote wiped out Spetafor's chances of realizing perhaps a $50 million profit on his land. He and his supporters were not happy when they left the board meeting today.
And Mr. Sandberg, don't worry about...
Just get that out of my face.
Oh, yes, for heaven's sakes. Leave the man alone. You persecuted him enough. You never gave him one.
Spetafor indicated that he has some other options, but had no comment on any immediate action.
I really have no comment at this time. Just keep tuned and see what happens.
However, it is possible that Municipal Affairs Minister Bill Vanderzam might come to Spetafor's rescue, since he does have the power to overrule today's regional district vote.
This NDP crowd take your farm over and do a better job farming, George.
All those out in there should go out there and try and farm 16 hours a day and see how they do.
Yeah, no, they don't want to go out there and farm like the rest of us. They want to get $15 an hour.
Terry Dolan, CBC News, Burnaby.
Canada's inflation rate eased again in February. Statistics Canada reports it dipped to 5.2%, down from almost 6% in January. But while Canadians got some more relief at the gas pumps, food prices are still rising by double digits. More now from the CBC's Nisha Patel.
It's tough not to notice higher food prices, especially for those running this Toronto food bank.
Cooking oil is way high, and almost some cases almost double. And rice is going up, sugar is going up, flour is going up.
Here, it's the busiest time of year. With the Muslim holy month of Ramadan about to begin, each day of fasting ends with a special meal called iftar.
And there are lots of dates here, you can see it. I just bought 6,000 bags.
But as those grocery prices continue to climb, so does the number of food bank users.
These days, it's very tough.
They hope to serve 7,000 families this month. Many are new Canadians who have been hit hardest by rampant inflation.
Grocery bills and everything is very expensive.
It is very, very difficult to live, to get food for your family.
The latest numbers show Canadians are paying nearly 11% more for groceries. Prices are surging for juice, cereal, and dairy. But meat and veggies aren't rising as fast as before. StatsCan says bad weather is hurting supply. Higher costs for animal feed and packaging play a role too. Though there's also an ongoing debate over whether grocers are taking advantage of inflation to hike prices.
we may get some slower growth in food price inflation moving forward, but are we going to see an unwind? That seems less likely.
Household budgets are also being stretched by mortgage interest costs, up 24%. Though lower gas prices and plunging childcare costs are helping inflation cool. Economists say this gives the central bank room to hold interest rates steady.
The Bank of Canada is probably on an extended pause, but the good news for Canadians is that they're probably not going to be talking about rate hikes anymore.
Still, inflation isn't expected to hit the 2% target until next year. And with forecasts of a recession, plus the uncertainty of the current banking crisis, Canada's economy still faces challenges. Nisha Patel, CBC News, Toronto.
Starting today, you can now track your passport application online. Ottawa has unveiled a new system that will free up more staff to process passports, and it claims the backlog has been virtually eliminated. But as Catherine Cullen tells us, there's still work to do to modernize the passport experience.
Well, the government certainly has faced some challenges on the passport front. If you think back to spring of last year, you might recall those remarkably long lineups in some Canadian cities. Some real tales of woe as people feared that they were going to miss their travel because they couldn't get their hands on a renewed passport. Earlier this year, the government said that the passport backlog had been virtually eliminated. Now they say the backlog is completely eliminated. Beyond that, they want to tell people that there is a new way to check the status of your passport application. Go to canada.ca/passport-status, and on that site you can check what is happening with your application. Has your new document been printed? Is it on its way to you? It's a way to keep track of all of that information. Of course, Canadians are used to being able to check this kind of thing online when it comes to, for example, a package that they've ordered. So why has it taken so long when it comes to passports?
I asked the exact same thing when I became minister because I found it hard to believe that you could track your package through Canada Post or through Amazon, but we didn't have that same opportunity for passports. It was something that became abundantly clear, and it's a big lesson learned from the situation where we were a year ago.
It is possible, though, that other challenges loom on the horizon. Contract negotiations continue with the civil service right now, and the minister did say today that the government has a contingency plan in place in the event that there is a strike, although she said she's hopeful that that can be avoided. There's also the bigger question of modernizing the passport process. The minister said that they are looking at a process where people would be able to apply online for passport renewal, something she hopes will be in place soon. But just how soon that might be, she couldn't say. Catherine Cullen, CBC News, Ottawa.
Still in the capital, Ottawa has banned TikTok from all federal devices based on concerns about its links to the Chinese regime. But the federal government hasn't pulled all its advertising from that popular social media app. And as Sophia Harris reports, some tech experts argue that is problematic.
Disinformation is false information.
A federal government public awareness campaign running on TikTok.
Get practical tips to identify disinformation at canada.ca/disinformation.
For some, it may seem surprising because Ottawa has blocked the app from all government devices over security concerns. The app's owner, ByteDance, is based in China, and the fear is China could force the company to share user data. But the federal government says it's still advertising on TikTok for things like emergency preparedness and armed forces recruitment because a third party posts the ads, so no government devices are involved.
I know your government announced.
After announcing the device ban, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said people might consider dropping TikTok.
I suspect many Canadians, from businesses to private individuals, will reflect on the security of their own data and perhaps make choices in consequence.
But some experts argue Ottawa is sending Canadians a contradictory message by continuing to advertise on TikTok.
It seems a little bit like a double standard to me to say, well, it's too dangerous for any of our employees to have, but it's okay for reaching teenagers.
I think it's going to be disappointing.
This public policy expert says Ottawa's continued ad campaigns look like an endorsement of TikTok.
I don't think it's the right use of tax dollars if we are in fact so newly serious and cautious about this one app.
Last year, Ottawa spent $1.7 million advertising on TikTok for things like voter registration awareness.
You got to understand who has control, what data you're giving it.
This tech expert says the government is smart to continue advertising on the popular app.
It's still a powerful platform. You do need to use these communication tools and platforms to reach your target demographics.
All provinces have also banned TikTok from government devices. Only Saskatchewan and BC say they're still advertising on the app. Sophia Harris, CBC News, Vancouver.
Police in Montreal say a second body has now been found after a fire at a heritage building last week. 5 people are still missing. It was being used as a short-term rental. As Melissa Francois explains, officials are warning the building's instability means it will be a slow search.
This morning, the coroner was on site. She is now part of this investigation. And because the victims will have to be identified through a scientific method, family members might have to provide DNA samples. Here's Montreal Police.
It will be a long process, and we will not be able to give names very fast, but we cannot make a mistake. We cannot give a name and then a few days later realize that we made a mistake. That is not an option. Identification of a victim needs to be done by 2 factors. In those 2 factors, one needs to be scientific. So, for example, using DNA would be one. Using dental x-rays.
Now let's look at the plan of action for today. The investigators will go inside what is left of this historic building here in Old Montreal with a crane because the structure is still unstable. They will be deployed in targeted area where they were not able to explore before. So as you can see, this will be a very delicate task for them. People are still missing. They are from Quebec, Ontario, and the United States. Melissa Francois, CBC News, Montreal.
Russian President Vladimir Putin says China's peace plan for Ukraine could be the basis for an agreement, but only, he claims, when Ukraine and the West are ready for it. That comment came as Putin and China's President Xi Jinping accused the West of prolonging that conflict. As Briar Stewart tells us, the pair are also making plans for joint military drills.
For President Vladimir Putin, this visit is a chance to show Russia still has friends in high places. President Xi Jinping said that China is on the right side of history when it comes to Ukraine. And he said he's committed to the 12-point peace proposal China introduced last month, which was criticized by some for not calling for the withdrawal of Russian troops. Putin warned about Britain's decision to send Ukraine its Challenger 2 tanks equipped with ammunition containing depleted uranium. It looks like the West indeed is ready to fight Russia to the last Ukrainian, he said. Their meeting was held as Japan's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida visited Ukraine. Also the same day that Russia released footage showing 2 of its strategic bombers flying over the Sea of Japan. On the streets of Moscow, there was praise for China and some reverence for Xi. He is, of course, very cool, said this man. China is a friendly country, and we hope for more cooperation. During their public statements, Putin mostly focused on trade. It relies on China even more now to buy its oil and gas, which is increasingly shunned by Europe. For Xi, experts say there is a plan behind his vague Ukrainian peace proposal.
Part of China's grand strategy in pushing back against the U.S. alleged global dominance.
Alexander Gabuev says China wants to take advantage of Russia's resources and its now weaker economic position, but it needs to try to find a way to make it more palatable.
And in order to push back against Western criticism for leaning too heavily on the Russian side, you need to come up with a framework on how to talk about this.
So Xi is framing these meetings as a mission of peace, instead of just a visit to a useful friend. Ukraine's president said he asked Beijing to join a Ukrainian peace plan, but is still waiting for an answer. Meanwhile, Xi extended an invite of his own to Putin to come and visit him in China. Briar Stewart, CBC News, London.
Former U.S. President Donald Trump remains a free man tonight, despite his own prediction that today he would be arrested. A grand jury in New York continues to investigate accusations Trump made illegal payments to an adult film actress to remain quiet about an alleged affair. As Chris Reyes reports, that grand jury is not sitting today, but Trump's opponents and supporters were in the streets.
I'm in front of the criminal courthouse here in Lower Manhattan, where, if charged, former President Donald Trump would be arraigned, fingerprinted, mugshot, booked. But that's if he's charged. That's a big if. This case is before the grand jury, but an indictment is not a done deal. However, over the weekend, former President Donald Trump went to the social media platform Truth Social, posted that he expected to be arrested today. He called on his supporters to protest, and that's when all of this activity around me started to happen. NYPD barricading the building behind me, increased police presence. Today, a handful of those Trump supporters, small but very vocal. The possible charges that Trump could be facing has to do with so-called hush money paid to the adult film star Stormy Daniels back in 2016. That payment being booked as legal fees, that would be considered falsifying documents, a criminal charge. If that was intentionally hidden from voters, that would be another serious criminal charge. So all of this could happen anytime. We're waiting to see if this indictment is going to come down. The Republicans saying that this is another case of politicizing and weaponizing the justice system.
I look at it from this perspective. We live in America and it should be equal justice. This was personal money. This wasn't trying to hide. This was 7 years ago, statute of limitation. And I think in your heart of hearts, you know, too, that you think this is just political. And I think that's what the rest of the country thinks. And we're kind of tired of that.
The police presence, the Trump supporters, you can expect all of this to remain here until a decision comes out. Chris Reyes, CBC News, New York.
At 6:46, that's a live look at California as another atmospheric river bears down on the coast. It was a sunny spring day across our south coast, though. Johanna Wagstaffe will tell us what's next in our BC-wide forecast and take a look at what's happening in California after this. Harsh winter-like weather from the Pacific continues to bear down on parts of California. Forecasters are warning people to prepare for wind gusts reaching hurricane force, along with torrential rain and heavy mountain snow. Southern and central California, as well as towns across the Pacific coast south of San Francisco, are expected to be hit hardest by this latest blast. The storm marks the 12th atmospheric river to hit the American West Coast since December. Our meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe joins us with our BC forecast. But Joe, concerning for our southern neighbors along the coast.
Absolutely, Dan. And this storm is really hitting hard as we speak. We're about halfway through the event. I want to take you to pictures from Wrightwood, California, where we've been seeing heavy snow through the day, along with those high winds. Now 250,000 customers without power this evening. And we have now officially surpassed the second highest snowfall ever on record for California, with over 1,700 meters of snow in the Sierra Nevada mountains. I've got to show you what this looks like on the satellite, though. It literally looks like a hurricane, a winter hurricane, with the center, the eye of the storm, making landfall in San Francisco as we speak. It's not its March cyclone. It's not gaining its energy from warm waters, but it is certainly bringing the kinds of impacts that we see with tropical storms, the winds and the intense downpours. And that stretches from San Francisco all the way down through Los Angeles. Look at all those warnings in place. So really overnight tonight into tomorrow morning, the worst of those impacts as this bomb cyclone, and that's what it is deepened 24 millibars in 24 hours takes effect. And one more thing I just had to mention with California, about an hour and a half ago, 4.6 magnitude earthquake just south of Eureka, moderate shaking being felt. No damage, but what a day in California. We'll be following that closely. We're high pressure, so not getting any impacts from that storm. High pressure is what brought us the sunshine today and tomorrow. We get to see it basically from sunup to sundown, and then things will change quickly Thursday. You can see that Pacific low moves in. Not looking to see it bomb out by any means. It'll just bring some showers Thursday to the south coast, but an all-day round of showers. So enjoy the sunshine tomorrow. Temperatures will be notably warmer, especially across the south coast. We could be hitting in places like Abbotsford and even inland Metro Vancouver, 15, 16, 17 degrees tomorrow. So we may just break a few daily temperature records across the south coast. I'll be keeping my eye on places in through the valley. 12 for YVR, but again, it could be another 3 to 4 degrees inland tomorrow. So get ready for a very warm and sunny day across the south coast. Now, all day rain, as I mentioned on Thursday, that will come with a drop in temperatures. Seasonal highs for this time of the year, based on our last 30-year average, about 10 degrees. So you can see we sort of jump around that for the next few days, getting above as we head into the weekend. Dan, we'll have to keep an eye on Sunday. Some models trying to push some showers back in, but all in all, there is definitely something for everyone there.
We got snow on the mountains here and people searching for the spring jackets. Oh, contrast.
I know. I got mine out.
No slouch. Thanks, Joe.
No, you're welcome.
After the break, we'll tell you about the push to electrify garbage trucks and other big vehicles in order to cut our carbon emissions. Stick around.
It's a huge mountain to climb alone. It's known as the most destructive cancer in humans. You go from 2 healthy parents to 14 days later, you have 2 parents who have a year to live, and within the year, you have 2 parents who are dead. So that journey all by itself is horrific. Add the pandemic, and it became just a level that was unimaginable. They were isolated from us, or us from them, majority of that time. There was days where I'd hit the floor, quite literally hit the floor, and let myself stay there and cry. All I could do in that time, and all I could think to do, and quite honestly, all I wanted to do was be a daughter. There's no way in heck I could have gotten through this without the support of the community around us. People very quickly jumped up to bring, meal trains, food, gift cards. They'd drop off soup at the hospital. They'd bring me books so I could read something. I mean, strangers were leaving gift bags at my front door with gift cards in them. My dad, when he was diagnosed and we went into the hospital that day, he didn't cry and he didn't look, overly upset. And he just was very deep in his own thought. And he said, okay, guys, this is how we're going to do this. We're going to slay one dragon at a time. And that just became our motto. I felt like the amount of regret that they would have at the end of the day when their loved one passes, can't fix that. But maybe I could give them a little bit of time back by putting money in their pocket.
A lot of us have lost our loved ones, and now we're on the other side of that. So we're supporting each other. We're talking about our feelings. It's just a connection. I think it's a lifelong connection for the wrong reasons, but it's very important.
Sometimes it's even a moment. Sometimes it's just a hard moment or a hard day, and they can get on that support group and leave that support group feeling better. And maybe that was the dragon they needed to slay that day.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
On April 11th, join CBC Vancouver's Johanna Wagstaffe at the Alumni UBC webinar with Dr. Simard and her work on the Mother Tree Project. The focus is to connect First Nations, forestry companies, government, and academics to create resilient forests and stewards of the land. Register at alumni.ubc.ca. And on April 15th, join CBC at the Vancouver Vaisakhi Festival, a Sikh celebration of the coming of a new year.
A push is on to get passenger cars and light trucks switched to electric power, but there are major gains to be made by converting larger vehicles like garbage trucks and heavy transports. And a company in the UK is driving that process.
Luna's Applied Technologies takes vehicles that already exist in the commercial vehicle space and re-engineers them and upcycles them to clean air powertrain. We're looking at product life extension, and we're looking to how to re-engineer this product to give it a future for multiple generations to enjoy. This factory here today that we're in, it has 1,100 vehicle capacity. That is an Eiffel Tower's worth of embedded carbon saved over a year. So if you put that into perspective and you actually go see the Eiffel Tower, you'll realize just how catastrophic it would be to replace all of these vehicles with new. Taking into account fleet operators, every one of these vehicles has a different duty cycle. Some councils or fleet operators have vehicles that do 25 miles a day, some 100 miles a day. So we've created a system where they can scale up and down the battery pack size. This has a 6-pack on this vehicle, 3 on each side, but this can be scaled back to 2, 3 or 4-pack facility. Now, if a fleet operator decides to change the route that the vehicle is on, you can just add capacity by adding 1 pack. This upcycling process is so important. It's normality in so many industries. You look at this in aviation, you look at this in rail. These are common practices. In automotive, we've been so used to this replace with new cycle, but there's 2 billion vehicles on this planet, and we're now transitioning from ICE to EV. This is the obvious choice for so many vehicle classes.
Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, our free app, as well as on YouTube, Instagram, and, of course, our website, cbc.ca/BC. Janella Hamilton will have your late local news at 11 o'clock right after the National, and I'll see you here tomorrow night. Take care.